Hello, everybody. I'm Chip Rogers. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are celebrating International Women's Day. This is the first of a two-part forward thinking series, and I really want to thank you for taking some time to be part of this. Now, today we're going to feature the women that are on our boards. In the first session, it's going to feature the AHLA Foundation with the AHLA President and CEO, Rosanna Mayetta. But before we do that, I want to tell you about this really unique place where we are live today. This is Hotel Xenia. It's been open since October. And if you ever come to Washington, D.C., hopefully you will, make sure you come to this hotel and just see what they have done with this place. If we could turn the camera around, I'm not suggesting we do that, but if we did, you would see all sorts of really interesting stuff featuring and celebrating the accomplishments of women. And there's no better day, of course, for us to celebrate that. So before we continue and talk about our sponsors, we've got a little video about the Hotel Xenia. Thanks again to Hotel Xenia for hosting this very special event. We'd also like to thank our sponsors. Without them, none of this would happen. So for our sponsors that have stuck with us through thick and thin, and particularly the sponsors of this single event, we want to say thank you to Brand USA, to Guest Worldwide, to Spencer Stewart, and to Wells Fargo. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rosanna and have a wonderful first part of our incredible event today.
Thank you, Chip, and thank you, Hotel Xenia. We are so excited. I can't tell you how excited I am to be in a hotel today with this towering, beautiful mural behind me. We have an exceptional panel today, so I want to get started and introduce the amazing women on the AHLA Foundation Board. First, Elizabeth Mullins, Vice President of Global Lodging at the Walt Disney Company. Malika Myers, Chief Human Resources Officer at Hyatt Hotels. Tricia Primrose, Global Chief Communications and Public Affairs Officer at Marriott International. Joy Rothschild, Chief Human Resources Officer at Omni Hotels and Resorts. Anu Saxena, Senior Vice President of Senior Vice President, Global Head, Hilton Supply Management, and Julianne Smith, Senior Vice President, Upscale Development and Transaction and Asset Management at IHG Hotels, and Foundation Treasurer and Secretary. I'm so excited, ladies, to have you join us today. We are celebrating women at the top of their careers, and we couldn't think of more important women to feature today. You each serve alongside me and the other gentlemen on our board of directors, and we're so excited to have you. I mean, I have certainly had the privilege of benefiting from all of your insights, and I'm grateful to each of you for serving in that capacity and being leaders for the industry. So we have a lot to cover, and so we want to get right into it. And I think one of the things that, while we are celebrating women in the industry, it's hard to have that celebration without really looking at how the pandemic has affected women, and not just in our industry. I mean, I think all the data points to women and women of color in particular being disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And so we want to start there. I mean, you're all moms, and you've had to deal with a lot of those same challenges. So let's start talking about that and how that's it affected your own personal lives, and then we'll go into the professional aspect as well. So Trish, I might start with you. Talk a little bit about what this past year has been for you.
Sure. Thanks so much. And thank you so much for putting together this panel and allowing me to celebrate International Women's Day with such an incredible group of women. Really appreciate it, Rosanna. So I am a mom of an only child, a 14-year-old girl. She is in 8th grade, and she's the most independent, self-motivated child you'd ever want to meet. So my pandemic experience has not been like others who are trying to manage educating elementary school children and balance work. I don't know how they do it. I feel very lucky and blessed that she's able to do everything on her own from an education perspective. In fact, this past week, she's just started doing the family's laundry. I kid you
Oh.
not. So, okay, it just gets better from there. But listen, you know, I feel blessed and lucky, but you were exactly right when you made the comment at the top that the pandemic has had such a disproportionate impact on women, particularly women of color, and sort of how that they have been managing all of this and trying to take on all these roles at home. And I think it sheds an even a bigger, you know, spotlight on the issue, though. It reminds us that leveling the playing field, as it were, is really looking at the systemic barriers that women and people of color continue to face, whether it's access to quality education or early career experiences that really enable them to set themselves up for a more lucrative and secure career. And so while we talk a lot about pay equity, it's really pay gaps and job insecurity too that we have to be focused on, because disproportionately when you have men at or near the top of organizations, that comes with more pay and more job security. So it's certainly an area of focus at Marriott, and we can talk more about that later in the progress we've made. But we're seeing it in the day-to-day for people, but it's also casting a much broader lens on what we need to do on a broader level.
Yeah, that's great. And I think we will spend some time talking about the people who did stay in the workforce, because there are even challenges for those who are now having to take on 1 or 2 or 3 additional roles while also dealing with the challenges of the pandemic at home. Anu, how has this past year been for you?
Thanks, Rosanna, and I echo Trisha's comments. Thank you to you and Chip and the AHLA community for organizing this. And happy International Women's Day to all the men and women that have joined us this afternoon. And again, a thank you to my fellow panelists, incredible women in your own right. And I'm thrilled to join today, and by the way, to work alongside you every day. Look, thank you for asking this question from the outset, Rosanna, because I think, you know, we've read so much about this, and I'm glad that I'm getting an opportunity to talk about it. But I think, you know, personally, for me as a woman, as a mother, you know, I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old, can speak to the experiences on both ends of that age spectrum. But, you know, it's really been an incomparable time to any other time that I can remember as an adult. You know, thinking back to the early days of the pandemic, the level of anxiety, the uncertainty, you know, we didn't know which way schooling was headed for the kids, the fear of health concerns for, you know, the family, my parents, my in-laws. It's been a tough and, you know, frankly, relentless time, you know, and to think that we're still in the crisis, you know, it's not over for us just yet. And, you know, like you mentioned, there have been documented coverage of statistics that, you know, there's added pressure on working mothers, caretakers, you know, women in general. We tend to take on the burden of the family's well-being. And I know that men and women in my network have made some tough choices this past year, you know, to be more present with their families, their children, their elderly parents. And look, I think there's been, you know, at Hilton, there's been a ton of programs, flexibility in the work environment, and a ton of other resources. And look, I don't take that lightly. I know that flexibility has been a privilege for many of us, you know, but I leaned very heavily on several leadership resources, guidance that was made available to me, several of us early on at Hilton. And, you know, I consciously started my day 30 minutes early in the morning, whether it was to read up on a Thrive Global article or Harvard Business Review, whatever it was for the day. I decided to incorporate an element of something I learned in, you know, whether it was Zoom fatigue or mental wellness in the day. And I asked for help anywhere I could. You know, my colleagues, my friends, my mom, even my 87-year-old grandmother from India was giving me advice and strength that carried me through that day. And you know, I think that was the story for many of us during those early days. And as far as leveling the playing field, the last thing I'll say is, you know, despite the challenges over the last year, I've seen a massive increase in this village effect, you know, a community of help. So many of my colleagues at Hilton became my community, checking on how I was doing, how they could help. You know, neighbors I barely knew offered to help, pods and subgroups. And of course, you know, my husband And I found myself doing the same. You know, every day I made time to call on someone and check on them. And look, I'm sure we've all benefited from this village effect. And I think that'll be something positive, something, you know, that'll continue on, because it really does take a village, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that certainly in this period where we have been forced to be more alone and at home and in our small units, the more you have wanted and needed that external collaboration and support. And you're right, it's definitely changed, I think, a lot of interactions for a lot of people. I'm going to ask Elizabeth, you the same, and then Julian, we'll go to you, and then Malika and Joy, we'll pivot to sort of the professional look at how this is affecting those who are staying in the workforce.
Well, once again, thank you, Rosanna, and thank you, fellow panelists. It's honestly an honor for me to be here with all of you today. My perspective is a little different. My daughter's 24 years old, so you know, I don't have the burden of children with me every day, but I will tell you, she started her family this year, and as a young working mother giving birth during a pandemic, she needed her mom. So she and her significant other and the baby came and joined me for 4 months, the first 4 months after the baby's birth. And so I did have a baby in the house for that first 4 months. Now, as the loving, I don't like calling myself a grandmother. She calls me Emma. So as the loving Emma, I didn't want to give the baby up. And I balanced as much as I could. What I will say to you, for everybody that does have children, this balancing act has made you all heroes. It's amazing what you have done to be able to continue your career trajectory, helping your company and caring for your family. I honestly, hats off. It is incredible. And as I said, heroic. As I look at this professionally, like Marriott, like Hilton, at Disney, I look to my left, I look to my right, and I've never been so proud. I feel really proud of the work that we've done in this area, but the statistics speak for themselves. And quite frankly, Rosanna, the statistics that you shared are sobering. And so what it tells me is that although we're making inroads, we still have a lot left to do. And so what's great about today is it's almost like this pledge for taking this next step, because as an industry, we're ready to leapfrog and take miles versus inches. And that's the exciting part of this moment.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, if you think about how many women, you know, in 1 year, the pandemic has wiped out a lot of the gains women have made, but at the same time, it has put them in a different spotlight. I think this pandemic has sort of personalized everyone at the workforce, right? How many Zooms have you had where your colleagues or your team members have had their kids in the background, or you're seeing the husband going through? I think it certainly, even subconsciously, just changes the way we think about work. Julian, talk a little bit about your own personal experience.
Yeah, thank you again, Rosanna and everyone for being on this panel. And thanks to AHLA for getting us together and the opportunity to serve on the boards. It's really been expansive for me in terms of experience and getting to know each of you. So thanks again. You know, I think back to a year ago, right, when we all were sort of forced to work from home and get on Zoom calls and WebExes. And prior to that, I had never done a video on conference call. I've been on WebExes, but I never had a reason to have my video on. It just wasn't sort of the cultural norm. And a few weeks into the pandemic, I really was feeling disconnected from my colleagues and my associates. And we all made a conscious decision to turn the video on, and it really changed everything. And now I think it's odd when the video is off. So it's just interesting how we adapt to kind of the new norm. You know, prior to the pandemic, I spent my career traveling for the most part, or being in an office. And 12 years ago, almost 13. So Trisha, I almost have a 13-year-old daughter in the house, so we'll have to talk. You know, my husband and I decided to have him be a stay-at-home dad. That was sort of a conscious decision we made, so one of us could be at home. So the home's kind of been his domain, and I've sort of stayed out of it. And like literally, because I've been on the road. So after being at home for a little while, it was a little bit uncomfortable. You know, where do I fit in? I'm a leader, I'm a mother. I would interject and start telling the kids what to do. And my husband would be like, aren't you supposed to be on a Zoom call or, you know, doing something else? So that was a very difficult transition, because when I am home, or before the pandemic, I'd be available to the kids. And I'd be working from home in our guest room turned into my office. And the kids had a really tough time understanding that I wasn't available. And I have an almost 13-year-old daughter and I have an almost 10-year-old son. So they're very much in the school age. And the remote learning has been quite an experience. As a college student, I don't know that I could have done that. So for elementary school and junior high age kids, it's been difficult. As far as our workforce goes, I feel fortunate, together with the women on this call, that we are able to work from home. That's not the reality for many of our hotel associates. They have to go to the hotel and work if the hotel is open, right? So we've had a number of hotels close, reduce staff. I mean, it's been a tremendously negative impact on our industry, the restaurant industry, particularly in urban markets. And that will change. We will come back, but in what form we shall see, and how quickly we shall see. And I look at what happened during the mortgage crisis and how many of the construction workers went on to do different things. And when construction came back, it was difficult to get crews together because they were in such high demand. So I worry about that at our property level staff. What happens when things do get busier? What have they moved on to do that have provided them with a little bit more flexibility, perhaps working from home? So I think that's a big concern.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue. I mean, if you think about it, prior to the pandemic, this was an industry that had 1 million open, unfilled jobs, and we had such a hard time finding people to fill those jobs. And now there's so much more competition for the jobs, considering we've already, we're 4 million lost jobs in hospitality. Just to put it in perspective, and we talked a little bit about the stats, but I actually don't think I shared them. The Bureau of Labor Statistics said in January, 275,000 women left the workforce just in January. And overall, in the last year, it's 2.3 million women have left the workforce, compared with less than 1.8 million of men. So it's definitely something that we need to be thinking about as the industry slowly starts to recover. But I want to turn to Malaika and Joy. You're both heads of human resources. You've been in the industry in good times and bad. What are you hearing from the women in particular who are still, who stayed behind, who didn't lose their jobs? How much more challenging is this for them? And what are some tools that the industry is looking at to not only keep them in their jobs, but then support them throughout the rest of this pandemic? Malaika, let's start with you.
Okay, I will add my thanks along with my fellow panelists for AHLA putting this together. I think it's fantastic, and happy International Women's Day to everyone. You asked a really great question, Rosanna. If you think about it, we've been in a health crisis, an economic crisis, a social justice crisis. And if I think about what's common across those three, it's really our mental health. I mean, all of those things are such huge stressors and sources of anxiety or fear or anger, and all of those emotions that we've all been trying to deal with across all of those crises which have hit us at one time. And so the mental health for women and men in the workplace has been on our radar in a really big way, because you add all of that to the fact that we've had to reduce our staff, and we do have people who are doing more than what they were doing before. And from at least the corporate level standpoint, they're doing that, and in many times trying to be, for me, it's 7th grade math, and sophomore stats class, which I've not been of much help with. So everybody's trying to do all of those things, and more than likely not taking enough time to care for themselves. And so there's two things that we've done that I hope will be helpful. Both are still in early stages. One is we actually launched a mental health assessment tool just last week. And the tool is called Hyatt Well Check. And it is literally a series of questions that colleagues can go through across all of the areas that sort of impact your mental well-being. And it allows you to kind of keep track of that over time, to monitor it, so that if there's something that's going on with you, you kind of get an early warning signal. And then there's some tools to help you sort of deal with it, if it's sleep or if it's stress or if it's anxiety. So we're really hopeful that the colleagues will use that. But I think even if you're in at a place we don't necessarily have access to that, the idea of just monitoring your own mental health has got to be high on people's agenda. And then the second thing we did that we highlighted right around the Thanksgiving holiday is something we're calling Do Not Disturb Days. And this was the notion that people just felt like they didn't have control, right? We don't have control. I'm on Zooms for whatever 8-9 hours a day, not a lot of separation, workloads increasing, and while we couldn't do a lot about a lot of those things, one of the things we thought we could do was to give people some period of time that they could control and do the things that they thought were most important. And so we did this around the Thanksgiving holiday. So the 3 days prior, we call those Do Not Disturb days. And the thought was that on those days, only essential meetings are scheduled. So, and by essential, the bar was really high. Like, we moved our executive committee meeting that week because we said we don't have to meet that week. So the really high bar on what is essential, but if essential meetings require it, then you should have it. We said that if you're out on PTO, then you should not be disturbed, put an out of office on, and no one should expect to be hearing from you. And then we also said, let's try not to make things due on those Do Not Disturb days, right? So you're not trying to run up to getting something completed. And we got amazing response from our colleagues. And we piloted this in the Chicago office. Really, really strong response saying that was helpful. Like, that's something that actually helped. And so we've put 12 of those days in the calendar for 2021. And again, if you don't have a plan to do that and you're just trying to manage this on your own, I think the concept is try to take more control of your schedule and create your own Do Not Disturb time if you can.
Yeah, that's fantastic, because there is now a need, because you can't pop your head into someone's office to just have more everything is a meeting now. So you really have to be thoughtful and intentional about your own schedule and preserving that time. Joy, talk a little bit about what you see, bigger picture for the industry around retention and supporting the workforce that it is currently working.
Yeah, I just have to give you one shout out. When I was coming up in the industry, pardon me, there was no International Women's Day. There was a panel of women to look up to. Just the fact that you're recognizing this day to me is a major milestone in my career. One of the things that we learned, we made a lot of mistakes during this pandemic. And we have a lot of things we wish we could do differently. But one of the biggest learnings for us was we were so focused on the people that we were furloughing and saying goodbye to, we were not taking good enough care of the people that were staying. And that was a very hard lesson to learn. And we started doing pulse surveys, and that's where we learned it. And there were things that we didn't even think about, like, you still have a job, you still have all your benefits. Well, there's so few of us, I can't take my PTO. So something as simple as, relaxing our requirement that you can only carry over X amount of PTO. We said, forget it. You've got that PTO forever. Just kind of gave people a sigh of relief. Right. So I think that the industry's going to need to be more flexible. And I don't think we are progressive when it comes to policies, but we had a mantra at the beginning of the pandemic that says, we will meet you where you are. So we opened our office in May, and that was very scary, but things are very different down here in Texas, as I'm sure you've all seen on the news. And regardless of whether you agree with it or not, we opened our office early. Well, half the people couldn't wait to come back, and half the people said, I'm not stepping foot in this building. So our whole mantra of we'll meet you where you are introduced a level of flexibility. I also think you can have flexible policies, but not all women are comfortable taking advantage of those. And I hate to say this, but one of our very highly placed executives has small children. He started having his kids on his lap during Zoom calls. And when he started running home because his wife had something to do and he couldn't be at that meeting because he was home or was telling us he was cooking dinner, it gave permission to the women executives that worked for him to do the same. So even though we had those policies, we needed to have some men that were showing, I'm a caretaker too. I'm a parent too. I have to teach school at this time. And I told him, I said, this has turned you into a feminist and you don't even know it because you're giving permission to people to feel good. But I think, you know, the majority of our company is women, and I'm sure that's the same for a lot of hospitality companies. I think women will come back to us if we're more flexible and if we continue to provide opportunities. And if we don't, they're going to go to somebody that does. So I have 1,200 jobs open today. I'm so excited that we have 1,200 jobs open. But I also have women that are burnt out. And so I would say we all need to look at our industry, which is 24/7, and figure out ways to relieve that stress, whether it's creating 4-day work weeks or job sharing. These are things that traditionally I don't think our industry has done a good job of. I think it's time to start looking at that.
That's really interesting. And which of the sort of flexible policies that have been implemented in the last year stay on, right? Because it's hard for those things to go away. In some ways, we've sped up some of those policies because we were forced to. And now what do you keep? And to your point, which do you build on? As we're going to be facing competition from retail that is, you know, also hiring up, and so it'll be very fascinating. Julian, you had an interesting, IHG implemented something interesting about Fridays that you wanted to share.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So we have no meetings Fridays. So similar to as Malika described, try not to book anything, particularly if it's more than, you know, a one-on-one. Sometimes it is the day that you're able to kind of catch up. So you can take advantage of it, of a clear schedule. And also recently we've implemented a periodic recharge day. So on Friday, the company gave all the associates kind of a free PTO day to do what you'd like to with the day. And some of my associates said, hey, I need to clean out my inbox. That's what I'm doing. I'm not really taking a PTO day. My daughter happened to be on spring break, so we spent the day together. But it's nice to be able to kind of reward those people, as Joy mentioned, who've been here working day and night, longer hours, smaller teams, but more work in a lot of regards based on where we are in the industry. So being able to kind of pay back a little in a small way, that effort is huge.
Yeah, and you forget too at some point, you know, you need that time and that space to actually be thinking and planning, and we don't give that enough space sometimes, because in a crisis you're just constantly putting one foot in front of the other and going, but that needs to happen so you can actually make sure you're hitting the right objectives, right? With everything that you're doing. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what the foundation is doing to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. We did just come off of a terrific announcement just about a week ago that we're very excited about, but certainly only happened because of the support of all of you. You know, announcing the $5 million commitment over 5 years with an action plan. And the goal there being to really create, sort of identify where are the opportunities, where do we need more women, people of color, women of color, and how do we get there, and how do we get them there? And Malika and Julian, you both sit on the task force, so I'd love to hear your perspectives. You know, we spent a lot of time at the end of last year meeting pretty frequently to come up with some very specific goals and targets and programs that would support those goals. What is your perspective? Do you feel like the outcome is what you had hoped for? Malika, I'll start with you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, first of all, Rosanna, thank you for allowing me to be part of that work, because this is an area that is a personal passion of mine. Maybe for some obvious reasons, as a woman of color, I've worked a long time in my career and in my community to provide opportunities, and so I'm usually the first to say yes when people ask me to participate, because it's an opportunity for me to make a difference. So thank you for allowing me to do that. And to answer your question very directly, yes, I'm very pleased with what we came up with, and I'm also pleased with how we came up with it. We talk a lot about the power of diversity and how that gets us to better outcomes, but I don't think we often stop to really appreciate it when you're in it. And I feel like the task force was a fantastic example of that, right? So like different companies, we had from academia, but at the association, those of us in the corporate world, but also different perspectives. And there was real challenge in our conversations. And I like that, because I think that really helped us get to a better place. I can remember we would debate a word, or is that really what we mean? And we really pushed one another. And I think that, that's what you hope to get when you bring a diverse group of people together. So, $5 million over 5 years is great, but the thing that I really appreciate, to your point, is that we have an action plan. There were many companies and organizations that have talked about the money that they're donating or putting to this effort. I think that's fantastic. I don't want to short sell that. Anybody who wants to put money towards this, please don't hesitate to do so. But it really needs to be backed up with an action plan. And I feel really confident about our ability to make a difference because we have that in place.
Thanks. Julian, what is your perspective on it?
Yeah, Malika really summed it up well. And I think it starts with the diverse slate of board members, or the group who came together to come up with, or help come up with the mission and vision statement. And it was really fun to listen to that sort of healthy discourse of, are we sure we mean that word? Is that the word we want to use? And I remember those conversations really well. The power of what you're saying and the power in an individual word and what it can carry was sort of the height of my experience in coming up with all of that. And the fact that we're focusing on diversity at all levels within the hospitality industry, I think is paramount, because it's not just C-suite. That's important, absolutely. It's also entry level. It's all of the things in between. And we're promoting the environment to drive accountability, because we all own it. It's not just a women's issue or a person of color's issue. It's all of us who are involved with it. And I think that the mission and the objectives behind this really embody that. And then ultimately, we're here to better serve our communities. And what's a higher calling than that, right? I mean, that's the end game. Hotels are bettering our communities, right? Just by being there and providing a place for people to work. So to be able to pull the fabric of the community into that, whatever community that might be, is just paramount. And the fact that we're leveraging our scale at AHLA, Hyatt can leverage its scale, Hilton, Marriott, IHG, Disney, all the companies already have scale we can leverage, but the smaller sort of mom and pop franchisees that really make up the fabric of our business might not have the ability to really understand what diversity means and how impactful it can be for our industry. So it's great. I'm really excited to be a part of it.
And we've certainly set up an ambitious goal, and I'm just grateful that the task force is staying put, and we're going to continue to need your help in the next 5 years. But I think you're right. I mean, I think the goal is to really make sure that we take into account every level in the industry, really looking at where there are some obvious gaps, but not neglecting all, because there's no check the box and you've accomplished diversity, right? It's a constant tending of that and ensuring that there is inclusivity and that everybody even aligns on what that means. And there's different meanings to different people. And so it's definitely something that we see as being part of the fabric of the foundation going forward. So I want to thank you both for participating in that. I do want to ask Tricia and Anu, both of you are, the largest global brands and have invested, enormous amounts of money and teams into advancing diversity in your companies, have both been named for best places to work. Talk a little bit about how you maintain that emphasis on that, particularly at a time of crisis when it is so hard. Tricia, I might start with you.
Great, thanks. And I think your point, Rosanna, was spot on, that the plan, congratulations to you and Chip and to the task force. It's not a check the box. It is, it's a deep commitment. And that's what we have at Marriott. We have been at this for a really long time. 20 years ago, we set up a board committee to focus on inclusive opportunity. And so 20 years later, where are we? We are, half of our senior leadership team is women. 44%, 48% in the US, VP and above, are women, with a goal of getting to 50% by 2025. So we're making strides because we put in place this plan so long ago. It's core to who we are as a company. So when the pandemic happens, and all of the various, Malika, you were spot on when you were talking about it being a health crisis, a social justice crisis, a mental health crisis, economic crisis. I mean, all of those things happen. So that can really throw an organization off. But I would say for Marriott, I think the hardest thing for us during this past year was the physically not being together. You had so many people above property working remotely. And when things happen like George Floyd's tragic murder, you don't have an ability to be together. So we've had to lean into the technology. David Rodriguez, who leads global human resources for the company, put together these Take Care community talks. And we thought, well, let's see, right? How does this go? We're going to bring people together, have conversations about where we are on the issues of race and how we continue to make progress. And, 4,000 people are signing into these town halls, which gives us, I think, great hope and comfort that we are able to have a conversation even in a remote setting. But it couldn't be more important that, while the pandemic continues to rage on, and hopefully we are in the final wave of this, so that we can come through it, but that we have to stay committed to what is so important from a company perspective. And I'm proud of the work Marriott's done and that we continue to do in that space. And I know you all are doing great work too.
Yeah, no, thank you, Tricia and Malika, Julia, and everybody. Some great stuff's been said about this topic, and it's interesting, Joy, you mentioned that you didn't, have a International Women's Day, and I think even through all of our careers, right, the amount of energy and I think work that has occurred in a short amount of time. I mean, to think that during a pandemic there'd be this focus on something that's been so important for so many years. I feel like we should all celebrate that a little bit, being here today, and the progress that we've seen in this space over the last year alone. And look, Tricia is right. I mean, look, I think companies, like Marriott, certainly Hilton. I mean, I think we were built on a foundation of inclusivity. Our founder, Conrad Hilton, believed that we could achieve world peace through travel, and which at its core is about respecting and celebrating the experience of others. And our D&I work as well has been ongoing for years. I mean, under Chris's leadership, particularly in the last year, I think in the last year we've been, on a journey of listening and learning from our teams at all levels. And I think through what we saw, the systemic racism, George Floyd and things. And in fact, I would say because we've all been remote, it has brought so many of us together to talk about this topic virtually that we necessarily wouldn't have had at the speed at which we did if we were all in person, because you'd have groups of people getting together in our corporate offices or whatever our physical logistical setting was. But look, I do think that, we all feel like, and that we have some idea of how it feels, but it's incredible how much you learn from people around you if you just ask. And I think at Hilton, our CHRO, Laura Fuentes, and her team put together a series of conversations, courageous conversations, that we picked a topic and we had some, I would say some pretty uncomfortable dialogue around topics that we all felt like we knew about, but we hadn't had a chance to really sit down and talk and listen, across our team. So I thought that was very powerful. I loved them. And again, you come from, I'm a person of color and I feel like I have a point of view and I know how it feels, but sitting through those conversations, and they're global, so thousands and thousands of attendees across the globe, I learned a lot and I thought it was very powerful. In fact, it gave me a channel to go home and talk to my daughter about it. We're a mixed household, and I felt like I never really had to address these things with her, but having these conversations at work opened up that dialogue at home, which I thought, for me was very powerful, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it. And look, for us at Hilton, again, yes, at every level, this is a journey that's never over. It's a work of a lifetime, and it does matter at every level, but certain levels have more clout than others to be able to really make impact. We welcomed Chris Carr to our board of directors. We're very proud of that. We have diversity goals across our corporate and hotel teams that's directly tied to compensation. It matters, where you put your money matters. And our diversity goes from our learning programs, our recruiting pipeline, and I think somebody mentioned this, which I think is the biggest testament to this commitment. It's no one group's agenda. It's not HR. It's not just the D&I team. It has to come through at every level within our organization, and the AHLA work really matters. Having this dialogue really matters. We all have to sign up to do this. And that's the way that we will make true progress. And I am very proud of the work that we're doing at Hilton, and obviously we contributed to the task force as well. So very proud of the announcement as well that came out.
And I think you said it really well there. It flows through every department. It touches everyone in the company. It doesn't matter where you sit. All right, so now we're gonna do something a little different. We're gonna move to a section on leadership, and we're gonna do a lightning round. So I might ask you to each turn your microphones on, and I'm gonna go in the order that I see you on my screen, and we'll see how this goes. So it's just, short, quick answers. I've got 5 of them here for you. All right, Elizabeth, first job.
I had a little vegetable stand when I was 7. It was Beth's Organic Vegetable Stand, 5 cents or free with love from Beth. That was my stand.
Love that. Joy?
I was a summer camp counselor at an 8-week girls camp in Maine and ended up doing it for the next 6 years. Loved it.
Anu?
My job until college was basically getting good grades in math. But I did do a small stint as an usher at the Miss World contest that was held in my, for the first time in my hometown in India. Lots of stories from that for those that are interested.
Malika, over to you. First job.
First job was a holiday season sales clerk for Things Remembered, which was a gift shop. And I'm so proud that they asked me to stay on, and I worked for them through graduation of high school.
Awesome. Trish?
Malika, I was wrapping presents, holiday presents at Lord and Taylor at 15, and did get promoted to sales clerk eventually.
All right, Julian.
Well, I illegally worked for my father in his dental office at a very young age, so that doesn't really count. My first paycheck producing job, though, was a video store clerk when VHS was a thing in our independent store in the small town I grew up in. And I worked there for 3 or 4 years through high school, and I absolutely loved it.
That's great. All right, Elizabeth, going back to you. Best quality of your favorite boss?
One word, courage.
Joy?
He threw me into this job, promoted me over my head, and believed in me. And I just have to tell this story because it's Women's Day. When he told me he was putting me into the role, I was gushing and saying, I'm going to do such a good job. I'm going to work so hard. He said, Joy, a man would never be doing this. Shake my hand, say thank you, and get out of my office. I've told that story to women through the rest of my career.
I love that. Anu, best quality of your favorite boss?
Yeah, I was Look, I think I would say that I would have said something different had we just not been through a crisis. But I think, look, navigating crisis, I think it's on the top of my list. Chris was so incredible for us, the entire leadership team, helping us keep a steady hand on the wheel, staying focused. It's tough to do when you're going through something unprecedented like this. So that's top of my list.
Malika?
Yeah, I think about the two things that help me to be my best, which are trust and respect. So those are the qualities that I most look for in anybody I'm going to work for.
Trish?
I would tell you as a communicator on this panel that authentic and empathetic communicator are just wonderful qualities that I had in a boss that are hard to find.
Julia?
Mutual respect and active listening.
Good. All right. I love those. Most important mentor in your life? Elizabeth, starting with you.
Yeah, mine are my two sisters. So they both had incredible careers. They both had large families, and they taught me how to balance the two, at least generally, not perfectly, but generally. The important thing when I say that is that they taught me was that generally was okay, and balancing perfectly was never going to happen. So, I still look to their mentorship in each and every day.
Joy?
It was my dad. He passed away last year. He was 89 years old, but he was a baseball coach and he was an optimist. And I try to take those two qualities into my job every day.
Love that. Malika?
It's my mom. She's still a person that I call when I'm trying to figure something out or struggling through something. So she's been there since the beginning and is an amazing woman.
Trish?
So it was my dad who told me from the time I was very young, you will be a leader of industry. I didn't even know what it meant. And this was ladies in the 70s, but he believed, he saw a future for me, and it was an incredible gift to have that type of confidence.
Anu?
Long list of mentors, men and women, but I'll agree with some of the panelists. My father to this day is my biggest mentor. Always believed in me more than I did, never let me say no. And he's always my first call when the going gets tough. So I wouldn't be here without him.
Julian?
Yes, I would also say my mother. She passed away several years ago, but she's someone who I would always turn to for a gut check, and someone who I still turn to through prayer and meditation. But in addition to that, I've had the same best friend since kindergarten. So she really knows me, and she can provide a really great gut check when I'm not sure kind of, what's going on or where my motives are coming from in a decision I'm about to make. So I'd say my best friend as well.
That's great. All right. Well, so we're coming up to our last question. I want to make sure that you each have time to answer this, because I think the people tuning in would really benefit from what you have to say here. So the question is, you've each had amazing careers. Some of you started in the hospitality industry and stayed, and some of you have taken different paths that have landed you here. Talk a little bit about what the most important lesson that you've learned in your career that now you share with people you mentor. So I'm going to start with you, Malika.
Wow. I guess this is something that a boss said to me fairly early in my career that I have thought about every time I've taken a new assignment. And this is when he was offering me a new opportunity to, I don't remember who it was, maybe Joy, who said and I was like, oh my God, right? And he said, if you're not a little bit nervous and anxious about a job or assignment you're about to take, it's not a big enough stretch for you. And so I've used that as a bit of a gut check for myself when I feel that anxiousness or nervousness that actually tells me I'm probably on the right path. As opposed to being something that makes me shy away, I tend to lean into it because I know that means it's a stretch, and that's what I want, is to be stretched.
That is so true. That's great advice. Anu, what about you?
That is great advice, Malika. Thank you for sharing that. I'll say two things, if I may, and these are things I tell myself. Number one, I think, is just patience. in your career. I think so many of us were so kind of wired to go and have a timeline and kind of have, one of the what's next is always the first question in our mind every year during review time. So I think it's so easy to fall into that what's next focus. I feel like it's very true, and it's a bit cliche, but just work hard, focus on the present, do your best in your current role, and the rest will just work out. And I find myself saying that to myself very often. And number two, I'll say, look, in terms of leadership, and this is important because I hope everyone on the call today is a future leader. Your team success is your success. And it's so simple, but it's easy to forget, particularly as you're moving up the ladder. So don't forget to bring people along your journey, and how you treat people, the environment you create, the motivation you encourage, what you recognize, that'll all be remembered. So very important as you are going up through the ladder and successes in your journey.
I think that's so right, because we forget often that people are looking at us. The younger folks are looking at how we handle those situations, and it means so much to them too. I think that's really, really great advice. Julian, over to you.
Sure. So one thing I heard early on in my career is the only stupid question is the one that you don't ask. So ask all of the questions, listen more than you talk. Another mentor early on in my career told me to be myself. I was in the development field. I always have been. And 20 years ago, it really did skew male, less so today. And she just said, be yourself. And she was a woman, Maureen McInerney, who was in franchise sales at Marriott. And she said, just be yourself, because people can see through BS. And if someone asks you a question and you don't know the answer, don't make it up. Tell them you don't know. You'll find out the answer and then follow up. So it's really be yourself, follow up, ask questions, and listen. And I've taken that to heart, and that's something I share freely with anybody I mentor as well.
Right. I love that. Don't pretend, there's so much BS, right? In any meeting that you've ever been in, right? It was particularly pre-COVID when, there was meetings just for meeting's sake. It really is true. There's something that's so authentic. And Trish, you talked about authenticity, right? Just own up to what you know and what you don't know. And people value that so much more. Trisha, what is your lesson?
Oh, so many great lessons from the panelists, but I would give you one that I think really helped me starting out in my career. And that is, every time you meet somebody new in your work setting, and you're working with them, you're working on a project, you're doing an initiative together, it is a rare opportunity. You've got to really deliver the goods. You've got to show up prepared for meetings. You've got to follow up. You've got to listen with intent. Because you just start to build your goodwill bank, right? Your reputation bank as somebody in the company who just knows how to get it done. And if, heaven forbid, something happens the next time you're working with them and it doesn't go as perfectly, you're going to be given the benefit of the doubt, which is incredibly important, I think, on a day-to-day basis. So it's that first impression thing we hear applied to so many parts of our lives, but really in a work context, that first time you're meeting someone. And it happens every day, right? So
be prepared. I love it. Elizabeth, over to you. Your advice.
Yeah, I think there's 5 words that, I've tried to use as a mantra at different times in my career. Definitely whenever I started a new job, just remembering these 5 things. Number 1 is be kind, making sure you're kind in everything you do. Number 2 is remember to say thank you. Just remembering to do that simple thing. Number 3 is to be brave. To realize that it's okay to go into a situation where you don't have all the others, and to lean on those around you to give you the answers that you need to succeed. Number 4 is to be tenacious, to never give up, because people are going to say no 45 times. And the one that wins is the one that's able to crack that code and open that door a little bit with each time they're told no, and to persevere until the end game. And the last one, it is to be kind again, but this time to yourself, to remember that it's okay to fail. I always say failure is actually a good thing as long as you learn something from that failure. as long as you come out stronger and better with maybe a different perspective on why you failed. And to me, those 5 things are what can perpetuate you throughout your career.
Fantastic. Joy, you get the last word.
Yay. I agree with everything that's been said, but there's an analogy that I love to use, and that is this business is a volleyball game. And when that ball comes over the net, everybody's got to dive. And a lot of times women have said to me, well, I wasn't invited to that meeting, or they didn't consult me, or whatever. I'm like, get in there and play. Just get in there. And the more you cross the line and leave your lane and add value to a process, the more you'll get invited next time. And so I encourage people to be bold and get out of your comfort zone and dive for the ball.
I love that. I think that's a great way to end the advice. And I will just say we're getting a lot of terrific commentary. Your advice has resonated with a lot of our listeners. But I love that because, often I find myself also telling my team, don't wait for the title to start assuming the role, right? And that's what you learn. And particularly as a woman, you just have to start adopting that role and acting like you deserve to be there. Because if you constantly wait for that anointment, however that comes, sometimes you might just continue to wait. Instead, you can show that you earned your place at the table. Well, so that is all the time we have. I could talk to you ladies for much, much longer. I want to thank you not only for joining today, but for being such phenomenal role models in our industry. It matters much to see how the path that you've each taken and where you are. I think you've done phenomenal. I'm so excited that I get to work alongside you on the board. Our board and our industry is so much better for having you there. So thank you for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. And before we sign off, I do want to remind everyone to join us this afternoon. Chip Rogers is hosting early cocktails with the amazing women on our executive committee and our board of directors, and that's one that you won't want to miss either. I want to thank Hotel Zena for hosting us today. It's been phenomenal to be in a hotel environment again. We're really looking forward to planning our next events, and with that, please stay tuned. Well, first of all, I want to thank our ForWard sponsors, because without them, we wouldn't be here. They've been phenomenal, and they're here to support us throughout the year. And that is what I wanted to say. You're hearing it first here, the ForWard planning for the rest of the year. We're thrilled to say that on May 11th, we're going to have extended programming. We're featuring Jill Ellis, who, for those of you who know, is phenomenal. She is the most winningest coach in U.S. history. It's going to be a fascinating discussion. There'll be plenty of terrific programming. And then we are hoping to see you all in person for the next ForWard event alongside the Lodging Conference. Harry Javer's been a long-time supporter of the foundation. So hoping that you can mark that on your calendars. We are looking forward to seeing you in person. And so with that, wish you all a fantastic Women's Day and a terrific afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you back here at 4 o'clock with Chip. Thanks and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.